Good evening, everyone. Um, Welcome again to our continuing lecture on agribusiness management. And this lecture is the, I think, the third of a series of lecture. So, class, as we have done in the previous times, we have actually discussed uh, before on like the concept or the context of agribusiness in the both in the local and in the global scene, and we know already what is going to really happen to food and agribusiness systems, or even the food and agribusiness situation in the global market, especially within the next couple of decades. So this time we would like to proceed you a little further on discussing the very important concepts of what agribusiness is all about, what is happening to agribusiness this time, and how are you going to prepare as professionals in agribusiness. What do you expect your professional world will be when you graduate from this course? No? Last time also we mentioned about the history of agribusiness, and also what are the component system or sectors or subsectors of agribusiness. We know that agribusiness is a system, and it's composed of five subsystems. The first one is the input subsystems. That is what we are going to discuss today. And the next one is production subsystems. And then you also have the marketing subsystems, and then you have the processing or the agro industry subsystems, and finally you have the agro services subsystems, or the facilitating subsystems. Facilitating it cost cuts with other subsystems and make it function the way it should be, or create an atmosphere or environment where it will enhance normal functioning of the entire agribusiness system. So this time, without so much ado, we will discuss on the agribusiness input subsystem. Now, the agribusiness input subsystem is composed of the various inputs to agribusiness. No? Now, what are the inputs to agribusiness? From our basic economics, the generic inputs, we have land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship or management. Now, in here, we sort of we qualify and maybe enhance, redefine those various inputs and make some more specific, like description of that particular input. Okay, so that we will be discussing some of these various inputs, because there are inputs to agribusiness, or inputs to the inputs classified under in agribusiness. uh, there are inputs that are really primary, and there are also inputs that are secondary. Now, it does not mean to say that the other one is more important than the other. No. When we say primary, it's an input that is at its raw state, or it will already be used for uh, inputs to run the production, to run uh, uh, the, the production system in a way. No? And the other one is, these are inputs that are secondary in a way that it is it is partially processed, and it is used for further processing. That's an input. Like, for example, beef. Okay, beef from livestock, from cattle, from cows. Then that beef will now become an input to what? It will become an input to meat processing, whatever products there might be in the manufacturing operation, and several others. No? Now, before I'm going to discuss all the different types of inputs in agribusiness, we will the one that you can see this time is actually the various orientation of the economic performance of the various regions in the country. Okay, so supposedly we are in this quadrant. Our country should be in this quadrant, but you will notice that our our country is actually what is actually like going into the basic, no, in the agriculture quadrant. You have seen here from positive quadrant to the negative quadrant. In other words, those regions belonging to the negative quadrant are actually growing very slowly, or in other words, they are finding it difficult to grow. Okay, but those regions that are in the in the positive quadrant, these are regions that are doing well in that particular quadrant. Now, this quadrant is composed of the agriculture quadrant, basically production agriculture, and then you also have the services, uh, services sector, services services uh, subsystems quadrant, and you also have the manufacturing quadrant also. In other words, if you are going in this direction, like you are becoming like, for example, uh, going in this horizontal quadrant of the industries, you are going towards industrialization. But what when we see from this diagram, most of our regions are actually going in, like let's say, or congregating uh, in the production, basic production quadrant. No, basic production. That means to say most of us, or yeah, most if not all of the agricultural activities in agribusiness of this country actually are more of basic primary agriculture. Only very few, if there are, only very few that are engaging in the industry, say, manufacturing operation. So that is what this graph is all about. Okay, so there is much to really be desired in terms of moving our agriculture towards manufacturing operation. Now, in that case, you have here Region 8. The direction of this quadrant is Region 8 is really going to, this one, Region 8 is going from basically agriculture to somehow a little bit agro-industrialization, but it's still within the basic agriculture category. No? So you will notice that the economic performance in for example, different regions are really, as far as agriculture is concerned, is really tied up in basic plantation or production agriculture. No? Now, that's region 8. Now, when we talk about inputs to agribusiness, we as well will discuss on how these inputs, or what is the situation of agriculture in our country, okay, or even our neighboring countries also. Now, the modern agricultural dynamics or the modern agricultural revolution is actually driven by these various factors or various directions. Okay, you have the first, you have development of new means of production, revolution in industry, motorization, large scale mechanization, and food preservation through freeze drying fermentation. So these are now the focus of modern agriculture revolution. So in terms of how much of these various activities are done in the Philippines, I would say we are still very basic. No? In other words, uh, uh, even in vegetable production, for example, vegetable and animal products, we can only see very, very few firms, if there are, processing vegetable. Vegetables in our country are sold actually as fresh, no, as fresh, directly eaten as fresh. No? Now, in our also in other areas of operation, you have the motorization or mechanization, our mechanization is still by far very low compared to our neighboring countries. Now, furthermore, there are also developments in agricultural, say, systems that will also disrupt the traditional way of agriculture, and that will also disrupt the traditional way of, say, for example, doing things, doing business in agriculture. Now, these are some of the, I would say, uh, developments that actually will change the course or change the pace of agricultural revolution. One is biotechnology, okay? Selection of high-yielding varieties and animal breeds. No? Then you have also the transportation revolution, development of networks of transport facilities, okay? Different hubs, something like that. And then you also have communication revolution. So this time it's very quick to communicate to various areas. Not like before, that it would take about the fastest is 1 week to reach one particular client by the crude communication that we have in the past. No? But this time, the click of your finger, you can communicate somebody away from you, even outside of the country. No? Now, we we also, in this particular subject or discussion, we would also underscore why is there a need for agro-industrial inputs. So that means to say there are inputs for basic agriculture, there are also inputs for agro-industrial inputs. Okay, why do we need inputs? We need inputs because first, land area remains the same. Now, there's a challenge to increase production. Okay, we increase production by 70% from this time until the year 2050. But how can you do that without the the like for example the without the aid of modern inputs? Okay, because our land area remains the same. In fact, it is decreasing land area because there are a lot of competition for various uses. Another is population growth. Very fast growing population is also challenging the, the way production agriculture is done. There is also, sorry, there is also what we call as demand for food and non-food in agribusiness. Biofuels, it's competing our consumption for corn and other staples because biofuels will use corn for alcohol or for ethanol production. They need to increase productivity. They need to increase production to support food, feed, and biofuel needs of the society. We cannot also forego why do we have to use corn for biofuel? No, that we cannot prevent that because economics will dictate that wherever the commodity will uh, generate the best use of the best result, then it will just gravitate in that direction. So biofuel is also giving alternative process, alternative options for as a for as a demand point for inputs. So that's why we need to have agro-industrial inputs. Now, inputs, as we have said, there are important factors in attaining farm productivity. Is input, and it determines product cost and quality. Okay? Whatever input you use, it will determine the cost of your cost of the product and also the quality of your product. Quantity of inputs should be optimally refined. Quantity or quality of inputs also will affect the quality of the output because what how can you expect? You have very poor quality inputs, but you cannot expect a good quality output. Okay? Also, there is what we call as timeliness of application of input. Very important is timeliness because the moment you are late in the growth say cycle of the plants, you can no longer get the best use, the best result of your inputs. Now, cost of inputs also is very very challenging. Combination of various inputs also. Now, so we have learned that inputs is a very important stimulant to production because of the challenge of increasing productivity, because of increasing population, and many other developments, competing use also, that there is always that clear and present and continuing challenge of using the best use or using the best input in our production operation. Now, input subsystem involves supply of various combination of inputs of farm for farm production. Now, in the input subsystem, there are many players. Okay, depending on what kind of input are you talking. If you talk about fertilizer as an input, there are five major players. If you talk about what? If you talk about like seed, okay, seed as an input, then you are talking about only very few players. But more often than not, these are all the input subsystem uh, business operation are actually uh, um, populated by big business establishments. Okay? Inputs also are packed or undergo proper handling system because of perishability. Otherwise, you wouldn't get the best effect of that inputs if it's going to spoil. No? Now, in the Philippines, is the Philippines sufficient in many farm inputs? That is now the question. Sufficient bakata, no? Now, developing countries are almost always not sufficient in farm inputs. Developing countries such as the Philippines are almost always not sufficient in inputs. So like for example, Philippines, we are not sufficient. That's why we import a lot of inputs. No, even seeds. We bought this. We buy seeds from other countries because to grow seeds in our country will be a very difficult, shall I say, situation because of our climatic problem. Okay, inputs also are ingredients. Input ingredients are also imported. Okay, and then import also mix with local materials. It needs to mix with local materials. And then cost and availability of inputs also is affected. Now, the input subsystem are classified into two. One is inputs for farm production and the inputs for primary and final operation. What are these? So these are the two categories or two characterization or delineation of inputs to inputs in agribusiness. One is inputs for farm production like fertilizer, feeds, seed, crop protection or agrochemicals, veterinary supplies, agricultural machines, agricultural labor, and etc. and such and so. Okay? While inputs for primary, that means to say, and final processing, these are inputs for really enhancing the normal functioning of the manufacturing operation in agriculture. One is packaging materials, processing machines, raw materials from the agricultural sector, no? Or raw materials like beef, chicken, or pork, or fish. These are raw materials. Gikan sa agriculture, kuano to, gamiton as inputs to primary and final processing. Now, labor inputs to, or major inputs to crop production. Let's discuss the first group, no? Major inputs to crop production or farm production. You have the following: labor, seeds, fertilizer, crop protection products or agrochemicals, farm machinery, and buildings and infrastructures, and also irrigation. Irrigation is a very important input. Now, all these are actually inputs for primary farm production. Now, let's take for example in the case of like these inputs. Now, the inputs you have to use inputs either local production or imported. Now, these are the inputs that we need. And then after that, these inputs are distributed to made available to the farmers through the wholesalers and retailers. and then until it reaches the farmer. No? So there are intermediaries. First, what are the inputs, and then who will distribute there to the who will distribute it to the farmers? Either retailers or direct suppliers. Okay. Now, first input that we need to discuss is labor. Okay, labor in agribusiness. Actually, in agribusiness as a whole, it's about two-thirds of the labor force in our country. In other words, agribusiness is a major employer of people. But agriculture alone is only about one-third, no? Agriculture. But when you talk about agribusiness, that includes all other, no, all other services in bringing the product from the farm production up to the market. Okay, and then agricultural labor is characterized by seasonality of pattern. Uh, Depende. Karon, kinahanglan og labor for planting. The following month, no, not anymore. With another season, labor, it very seasonal, no? That's and not only it's very seasonal, it's highly disorganized. Where can you see, or yeah, where can you see agricultural laborers organized as a union? No, in our country, it's very uncommon. The only sector who can make a union is actually those in the plantation where it is run by big corporations. And then labor also are mainly concentrated in plantation type of agribusiness. Now, what is the situation of our agricultural labor? Those in all branches, activities, or in farming consist of 40% of the total labor force in developing countries. No? So 40% nasa developing countries. Agricultural labor uh, consists of the following types. No? These are the different types of agricultural labor. Family, hired labor, regular or exchange labor. Exchange. Okay? So these are the types of labor. No? Now, what are the issues in agricultural labor? Of course, low wages. Okay? And then agricultural labor sector also is does not enjoy constitutional rights for workers. Oh, no, you cannot unionize people, for example, working in agriculture because in the first place it is very seasonal, no? And these workers are all on call in terms of working and then right working condition. Then therefore they don't have the right for collective bargaining, the right for security of tenure, because almost everyone is on call or uh, per output status. No, now that is agricultural labor. Now let's go to the industry, the seed industry. What is a seed? By the way, what is a seed? A seed is a plant material used for the production of food, forage, fiber, and industrial crops. So, a single seed, once it will grow, it becomes or it will bear fruit multiple times. No? Seed industry components of the seed industry. These are components of the chain of activities undertaken by individual associations, cooperatives, and corporations, academic institutions, public research institutes, and private companies. These are the compositions of seed industry from the individual farm up to the private companies. What are the classifications of seed? Now, seed classification consists of the breeder seed, foundation seed, certified, and good seed. Okay. Now, breeder seed actually these are seed directly controlled by the originating plant breeder. While foundation seed is a breeder seed also, progeny of the breed, kaliwat ba? No? And then certified seed, progeny of the foundation seed, so handled to maintain genetic identity and purity. Now, good seed, any class of the certified seed, not approved by the National Seed Industry Council, INSEC. Now, there is also a what? a favorable, say, legislation that supports the seed industry development in the country. That is RA 7308. It aims to promote and develop the seed industry in the Philippines. There are four major groups affected by this legislation. One is rice seed, corn seed, vegetable, and legume. These are the most, and even forest seeds. These are the most common, common type of like vegetable or common type of crops that are critical for uh, the survival of the economy. Rice, corn, vegetable, legumes, and forage for for pasture. No? Now, who are the key players in the seed industry? The key players are government agencies, 38 government-owned seed network in the country, and totaling cultivating about 5,000 hectares. By the way, seed industry in the Philippines only concentrates in cereals. If you talk about vegetables and other crops, you you may or you can uh, we can expect already that lots of importation are actually done there. No? Large proportion of rice foundation seeds and corn foundation seeds produced at the government experiment station. The quantity of seeds per hectare in the Philippines is really a technical recommendation. No? Now, good seeds increase yield up to 10%. Hybrid utilization is still very low among farmers. That is true. No? The utilization of hybrid variety, very poor paghapon. No? You can just imagine, ang utilization na to sa seed is not even 50 kilograms per hectare. Very low. Much more sa other inputs. No? So there is a need to push ahead with a convincing and really transforming our farmers to uh, use regularly hybrid seed. Then you have another is and still under uh, seed industry. You have the planting materials. It's also very critical. Quantity. In other words, planting material is a sexually as a sexually propagated piece of like planting materials, of course, no? While seeds is are sexually propagated. No? Higher planting density will yield higher output but lower yield per plant. Okay, so we have a drawback also that kung mag uh, salig ka sa ano sa planting materials, maybe cuttings, well, you will the downside there is it will not support high growth trajectory because it is coming from a mature branch of the parent material. For perennial crops, planting material should be properly selected. Abaca, like cacao, coffee, etc., and mangoes, for example. There is a need to carefully select asagi ka ng planting materials. Now, seed producers, we have these different players in seed production. In the Philippines, you have East West, BM Domingo, Pilipinas Caneco, Ramgo, Crab King, and Harvest Agribusiness Corporation. Okay. Now, in talking about seeds, as we have said, it's essentially concentrated in cereals like hybrid corn. These are the list of companies developing or yeah, developing seeds in the Philippines. Okay. Now, what are the issues in the seed industry? That means to see what are the challenges in the seed industry. You have the seed industry is characterized by heavy importation. We import practically almost all except cereals, our seeds. No, we import them because to grow it here might not, say for example, develop a good quality because of our climate. All the seeds are recognized as an important input in diversifying agricultural base and in making crops competitive. There is still lack of support in the seed industry. Okay? And in fact, there is low utilization of seed in production. Now, what are the issues again in seed industry? You have supply system of seed is generally underdeveloped. Planting material is mixed and even highly variable. That's why even VSU, no, VSU has seen the need and the importance of getting access to quality planting materials. That's why VSU in the next couple of years will propose to establish a regional center for planting material production, because there are a lot of inquiries already we received, inquiries from various parts of the country asking for availability of a particular planting materials. No? So we might as well transform that particular inquiry in a project that is responsible in seed and planting material production. Now let's go to the fertilizer industry. In the fertilizer industry, the what is a fertilizer? Of course, simplistic. It is a nutrient required to grow abundant, healthy plants in agriculture. It helps farmers provide abundant yields of high quality crops. Okay, that is generally the use of uh, for example, a fertilizer in the fertilizer industry. Now, uh, what is the function of fertilizer? It's may gamit fertilizer. First and foremost, improve soil fertility. Then it will also improve the soil balance and also provide macronutrient capability. And then you have also sulfur and sulfur we have for other types of skin disease. Now, micronutrients, iron, boron, copper, etc., are actually trace elements, but very important for really supermarket shelf, the life of the vegetables in supermarket shelves. Now, fertilizer application. How do we apply fertilizer? This should be timely according to the growth of the what? The growth of the crops. No? We have to we have to sync the application of inputs that will be that will match with the life cycle or growth pattern of the plants. Otherwise, if you apply inputs not at the proper time, it will just redound to all expenses without having to get an additional value or production. No? Now in fertilizer, 60% used in food crops. What are these? Rice, corn, and maybe bananas and sugarcane. But other crops like vegetable, very low fertilizer consumption. Okay. Now in fertilizer, we have like for example NPK recommendation. Okay, and then we also have a 25-year trend of farmers generally use urea, ammonium sulfate, complete, and ammonium phosphate. So you combine everything to meet the soil requirement of your particular farm. Now, fertilizer consumption. So in terms of fertilizer consumption, our fertilizer consumption for crops is actually very low compared to our neighboring areas. We only have 55% using ammonium sulfate, 40% using phosphatic fertilizer, and for potash, 10% is very high. We only consume or use 5%. How important is this crop? Is this fertilizer material? Only very few farmers know that. No, consumption of fertilizer is 1.5 million metric tons a year. That's very small, actually. We had this research, we had this survey, and we found out that in Eastern Visayas, the usage of fertilizer is not even one half of the recommended. No? Now, sugarcane and banana and pineapple plantations are the main users of potassium and also sulfate. Now, who are the uh, exporters of fertilizer? So these are the exporters of fertilizer where we get our fertilizer raw materials, granulate or process it here to be sold to local producers. You have Morocco, Russia, Belarus, and Israel. We also buy input fertilizer material from Israel. Now, who are the industry players? The industry players, what are industry players? These are the facilitators and stakeholders of the industry supporting the normal growth and functioning of the, for example, that particular subsystem. In here, fertilizer. More than 600 industry players. Daghan kaayo. From maybe for manufacturers, there are only 3 or 5 manufacturers. But the wholesalers, traders, and distributors that constitutes more than 500 or even 600 industry players to make sure that fertilizer gets into the farm of the farmers. But as I have said, even if it is available, our what our attitude towards the use of fertilizer is still very poor. Why? In the Philippines, Manggod, fertilizer is seen as a risk enhancing input. Why? Why do we have to say risk enhancing? The risk of losing, not being able to recover your expenses because you applied fertilizer. For example, you apply fertilizer during monsoon time, habagat, gibaha imong farm, di nawala ng imong gigasto. So, increasing the risk, exposing farming enterprise. So, around 50% of organic fertilizers are manufactured also. There are 5 local players of the Fertilizer Versus Authority. Now, chemical fertilizers imported from foreign manufacturers. Fertilizer distribution again, uh, traditional distribution channel is supplier, wholesaler, retailer. Okay, only very few farms, if there are, will buy directly from the manufacturer. Imagine if you can cut short the number of intermediary, you will help. You will be able to get the quantity discounts and being able to serve cheaper fertilizer to our target clientele. Now, these are productions of fertilizers. What should I be concerned about letting you see this? It means that from among the fertilizer material, ako kaya konsumo sa nitrogenous fertilizer. No? We only apply in the Philippines nitrogenous fertilizer. What is the reason? Nitrogenous fertilizer is only good for vegetative growth. But you need another kind of fertilizer to push it further, develop a good harvest, which development of harvest is actually not a vegetative growth of the plant. Okay? So we need other types of fertilizer to support the growth of other growth sequence of rice or if it is a corn. So nitrogen regulatory fertilizer. So you have also options for organic fertilizer. You will notice that until 1916, okay, nagbaba ang sales sa organic fertilizer. Meaning, gamay ra ni gamit ng organic fertilizer. Okay? So fertilizer cost, the cost of fertilizer to farmers is relatively high due to transport cost, rural infrastructure, and small purchase of small farm from small farmers. It is actually a fact. Now, although there are organic fertilizer, increasing because of increasing loss of fertilizer soil fertility, now much to be desired yet in terms of increasing awareness of balanced fertilization. Now, the major markets, the major buyers for fertilizer in our country, you have rice, okay, you have rice, corn, sugarcane, vegetables, cabbages, banana, pineapple. What can you observe? No? The first 3 actually are the major. No? And these are the major fertilizer users that are relatively, uh, say, inclusive in character. But Cavendish banana, and then you have all other, the pineapple, these are all plantation agriculture. Only very few can afford to do that. Now, there are key players, key manufacturers of the fertilizer industry in the Philippines. Pilpos, Atlas, Soil Tech, and Farmix. So, kanaragid sila. And all other players are actually doing business at the wholesale and retail work or activity of the chain. So the fertilizer industry in the Philippines has shown a modest growth of about 8%. It's basically urea or nitrogen consumed plants. That's why we have a no data where uh, there is problem distribution, and that this particular problem is solved by using what? Using appropriate technology. Now, what are the opportunities in the fertilizer industry? Kung sa may mga bright spot in the fertilizer industry. First is just the growing demand of fertilizer for non-food product. Now, growing demand for biofuels resulted to 2.5 increase in demand for fertilizers. Biofuel. Increase in demand for organic fertilizer. Fertilizer domain shifting opportunity. Okay? There is also a promise that let's this in like in um, organic farming, no, organic fertilizers domain shifting opportunity. Then there are, people are slowly shifting to organic fertilizer use. Another bright spot is active government support. No, every year, every program na agi na nakaakibat nga fertilizer use. Kaya di mo ang program niya nakaakibat, nakakabit ang fertilizer, people will not be enticed to apply fertilizer. You have to invite them to use fertilizer. And plus, because there is a program, it will also save the fertilizer like manufacturer, because only very few are buying to them. No? Issues in the fertilizer industry. Katong ganina, bright spot karon is there is a worldwide shortage of raw materials. Time will only tell us nga wa panahon nga di ta kapalit, no? So total supply will be 60% of the requirements. Production is 25 and inventory is 25. No fertilizer application rate. Kuhaan lang yun. Ang fertilizer application even in science, okay, it's only about 37% or 35 kilograms on average. China is the major supplier imposed 35% of tax. Cost of fertilizer has shoot up over the past year, putting pressure on profit margin farmers. Okay? So, ang kuan po, mga sa example, fertilizer manufacturer abroad, they are imposed with 35% selling tax. So, gamay na kaayoy mo aris ato, we need to manufacture our own fertilizer. Low threat of energy, of course, high bargaining power of suppliers, low threat of substitute. Include organic fertilizers in the product line. Intensify information and dissemination to convince farmers to use more fertilizer. Okay, so it's almost like uh, from like seed and also fertilizer. It's almost like our particular subsystem is import dependent. Because if we're not going to import fertilizer, for example, we would not be able to supply the needs of even the local market. And we cannot do that because our crops are fertilizer consuming. And because of expanding population and several mouths to feed, we really need to increase production. So, dili pwede, di ka maggamit ng inputs. The other is also, there are issues and challenges. Now, the presence of government programs in agriculture, ni adto, what's that? GNA, na ay Agri-Pinoy. Abot lang sa kang Duterte, kung sa'y programa anak, murag, wa man kay katuan man. But then again, the subsidy that is in operation in agriculture is still in effect. No, is still in effect. The only major impact of the Duterte administration to the input sector is giving free irrigation, no? Giving free irrigation to farmers in the hope that the production will increase. Have they increased their production with free irrigation? Only time will tell. Why? Because what can you irrigate also if the water is already very low, or the quantity of water is very low already at the water table. So even if it is free but you cannot access it because of limited supply, the same thing can happen. Now the other one is agricultural labor. It is also what? Agricultural labor is also beset with several issues. Issues about tenure security, issues about seasonality. Why? Because our farm operation in the Philippines are actually fragmented. May gagmay lang ba? Unlike in other countries, huge ang ilang farm areas, okay? Because in that sense, they can hire regular workers, and it can improve the employment of people in agriculture. In Europe, actually, dagko mo na ilang farm dito. You might say nga, dagko silang farm, sumaw ng kuan kayo, kanabang efficient sila. But to begin with, these farmers did not start from large hectareage of farm. The same thing in our situation, they started with small farm and then renting the other farm, renting several other farms. It now grows bigger and they also congregate. Now, why can't they just why were they allowed to rent? Because the same thing in our the same thing in our country, people are moving to the cities to get more lucrative and white collar employment, leaving their land in the rural areas, and the farmer that remains there are renting the idle plots of land, renting these idle plots of land and cultivate productively for agriculture. So what happened? What is the difference between us? Sa ato, biyaan ang yuta, mulargas Manila, walay tanom. Kag imo ng tamnan, nya, walay, di mo magkasabot, uh, they're not going to allow you, or there's going to be social unrest. So we abandon the land in the rural areas, and then we plant nothing actually. So we need to change that kind of attitude and policy that will, in effect, promote the maximum utilization of land in the rural areas. Kung wala mo na tamni, patamni na sa uban, kunya, kuha lang kang bahin. Pero it's not a tenant, just renting something like that para intact gyapon imong yuta. Okay? So that's the situation in the input sector. Next meeting, I will lecture on part 2 of this particular series. Then you will see the situation of all other inputs to production. So suffice it to say that this time we will end the lecture today, and hopefully I will be able to also give you more challenges in the happening in the other sectors, as we also uncover the situations of the various components of the input subsystem. To recap, what are the different types of inputs? Inputs that are used for farm production, and inputs that are also used for further processing. Okay, so these are different inputs. What we are discussing today are inputs. We started discussing inputs for farm production, primary inputs. Okay, thank you, and God bless all of you.